There are some serial killers who hunt in the shadows, and then there are those who become the shadows. Men who move through the world like smoke, shape-shifting, untraceable, and utterly ordinary. Israel Keyes was one of these men, and for over a decade, he crisscrossed the United States, burying tools of death in unmarked graves, killing strangers at random, and vanishing without a trace. He wasn't driven by rage, or lust, or even hatred. He murdered for the same reason an artist paints, because it made him feel alive. Keyes wasn't just elusive, he was a pioneer. He perfected a method of killing so random, so geographically scattered, that law enforcement didn't even realize a serial killer was at work, until he told them. He buried kill kits years in advance, flew to states he'd never visited, and targeted victims with no connection to himself or each other. Couples, hikers, teenagers. He left no patterns, no signatures, just silence. This is the story of a man who turned America into his hunting ground. He didn't rage, he didn't stalk. He waited and waited, and then he struck without warning. And after that, he just vanished. This isn't just a story about a serial killer. It's about the unsettling truth that monsters don't always lurk in dark alleys. Sometimes they're the quiet neighbor who waves to you every morning, the handyman who fixes your sink, the father who reads you bedtime stories. Israel Keyes was all of these things, and by the time the law enforcement realized who he was, it was already too late. To understand how Israel Keyes became America's most elusive serial killer, we have to start in the stark isolation of the American West. He was born in 1978 in Utah, and his parents were strict Mormons. But not that kind you'd recognized. They hated the government. They hated modern life. And when Israel was a toddler, they moved to a cabin in Washington. No electricity, no neighbors, just trees and paranoia. He was homeschooled, without friends, without TV, just survival skills and the Bible. And by the age of 10, he could shoot a gun, skin an animal. By his teen years, he declared atheism to his parents. And after an intense argument, they evicted him for blasphemy, instructed his younger siblings, who looked up to Keyes, to never have contact with him again. At 20 years old, he joined the US Army, and while being stationed in Egypt, Keyes befriended several soldiers, informing one of them that he would like to kill him. His former army friends noted that he kept a habit of keeping to himself. Later, he was even awarded an Army Achievement Medal for his service as a gunner and assistant gunner from December 1998 to July 2001. He was then honorably discharged and relocated to Washington. After the army, he drifted. He worked construction jobs in Alaska, fathered a daughter in 2004, and built a reputation as a quiet, dependable handyman. To his neighbors in Anchorage, he was the man who shoveled their driveways in winter. To his daughter's teachers, he was a doting single father. But, beneath this facade, Keyes was perfecting a system. In 2007, Keyes started a construction business in Alaska called Keyes Construction, while working as a handyman, contractor, and a construction worker. He was regarded as a skilled and trustworthy worker, but several female customers reported Keyes exhibited brief facial expressions or dark moods that made them very uncomfortable. Between 2001 and 2012, Keyes buried over a dozen kill kits across the US. Duffel bags filled with guns, ammunition, bleach, zip ties, and cash. He hid them in remote forests, often returning years later to retrieve them. And these kids weren't just tools, they were insurance. If caught, he could claim he'd stumbled upon the bag. As he would return years later, dig up these kill kits, he would commit murders hundreds of miles from his home. No connection to the victim, no pattern, no logic, just opportunity. Keyes didn't hunt. See, he waited. He'd drive for days, park at rest stops, and watch. He would watch hikers, campers, couples arguing in parking lots, all random people he targeted all across the United States to avoid detection, planning for months before he committed a particular crime. Keyes claimed not to kill children or parents of these children, primarily because of his daughter, because he was afraid she would find out about him and his crimes. But police did suspect Keyes of killing several teenagers and children. It is strongly believed that he started killing after he was discharged from the army in 2001. In total, he was held responsible for 11 deaths in total. And unlike most serial killers, he did not have a victim profile, stating that he would choose his victims randomly. To the FBI, he later told, "I wanted someone who wouldn't be missed right away. I wanted someone who was convenient." His first confirmed victims, Bill and Lorraine Currier, fit the profile perfectly. Bill and Lorraine, a middle-aged couple in Essex, Vermont, were living a quiet life. And then in July 2011, Keyes broke into their home. He tied them up before driving them to an abandoned farmhouse where he shot Bill before sexually assaulting and strangling Lorraine. Their bodies were never found. When police arrived to Bill and Lorraine's house, they found no bodies, no DNA, and no motive. Just a ransacked house and a missing couple. And for months, the case went cold, because Keyes had followed his golden rule. No connection, no closure. See, Keyes' crimes weren't impulsive. They were masterclasses in patience. He'd fly to a state, rent a car with cash, and drive hundreds of miles to retrieve a kill kit. In 2005, he buried one near Lake Ontario. 2 years later, he returned, dug it up, and shot a man whose identity he never revealed. In 2009, he flew to Chicago, rented a car, and drove to Illinois, only to abandon the trip as he couldn't find the right victim. However, he wasn't infallible. His obsession with control led to his first mistake. His target was 18-year-old Samantha Koenig, a barista working the night shift at a coffee kiosk in Anchorage. Abducted her at gunpoint, zip-tied her hands, and dragged her into the freezing night. See, for Keyes this was personal. He had broken his own rule, never kill near home, but he couldn't resist. He killed her. And then he sewed her eyelids open to stage proof of life Polaroids for $30,000 ransom. The FBI called him the most organized killer they'd ever seen. He left no DNA, no witnesses. Just an empty grave and unanswered questions. And then he made a mistake. He got greedy and he used Samantha's debit card. With that, cameras caught him. The chase began. Israel Keyes was arrested in Texas on March 13, 2012. While incarcerated, Keyes spoke to the state and federal investigators several times over a period of months. He confessed to murdering the Curriers and Samantha, but hinted at others. "I'm not going to tell you where the bodies are. That's for you to find." He refused giving names, dates, or locations. There was no connection, no closure, and that was his point. On Wednesday, May 23rd, in 2012, he tried to escape prison during a routine hearing, using wood shavings from a pencil to pick his cuffs. Later, U.S. Marshals used a taser to subdue him. And on December 2nd, 2012. He died by suicide, by cutting his wrists in attempted strangulation. A suicide note was left by his body and consisted of an ode to murder, but offered no clear clues about the possible victims. In 2020, the FBI released the drawings of 11 skulls and one pentagram, which had been drawn in blood and found underneath Keys's bed after his suicide. One of the drawings included the phrase, "We are one," written at the bottom. The FBI believes the number of skulls correlates with the total number of his actual victims. Israel Keys was unlike any serial killer before him. He didn't kill for pleasure, revenge, or passion. He killed because he could. His victims were chosen at random, and his crimes were meticulously planned, leaving behind little to no evidence. Even in death, he remains an enigma, his secrets buried along with his victims. And the FBI continues to search for answers, but some mysteries may never be solved. So let me leave you with this. Next time you meet someone kind, someone ordinary, someone normal, ask yourself, what secrets could they bury? And how well do any of us really know the monsters next door?